Albert Einstein was born on the 14th of March, 1879, in the quiet city of Ulm, located in the Kingdom of Württemberg within the German Empire. Nothing about his birth suggested that the child would one day redefine humanity's understanding of time, space, and reality itself. His parents, Hermann Einstein and Pauline Koch, were secular Jews, practical and hard-working, with no academic background in advanced science. Hermann was an engineer and salesman, while Pauline was a cultured woman who deeply valued music, particularly the violin, an influence that would quietly shape Albert's inner world for life. Soon after Albert's birth, the family moved to Munich, where Hermann and his brother founded an electrical engineering company. Germany at the time was undergoing rapid industrialization, and electricity was seen as the future. Growing up surrounded by discussions of circuits, machines, and innovation subtly exposed young Albert to scientific curiosity long before he understood it. As a child, Einstein developed differently from others. He spoke unusually late, worrying his parents. Even after he began speaking, he often paused mid-sentence, quietly repeating phrases to himself before saying them aloud. Teachers would later misinterpret this behavior as slowness or lack of intelligence. In reality, Albert was carefully constructing thoughts in his mind, unwilling to speak until ideas felt complete. At school, Einstein struggled with the rigid Prussian education system, which emphasized memorization, discipline, and obedience over curiosity and imagination. He disliked authoritarian teaching methods and frequently clashed with instructors. One teacher famously told him that he would never amount to anything. These early experiences planted a lifelong distrust of authority and blind conformity, a theme that would later define both his scientific and political views. Despite academic struggles in traditional subjects, Albert showed a deep fascination with nature and mathematics. At the age of 5, his father showed him a simple compass. Watching the needle move, seemingly on its own, left Albert mesmerized. Years later, he recalled that moment as one of the first times he sensed that unseen forces governed the universe, forces that demanded explanation. By his early teens, Einstein was teaching himself advanced mathematics and physics far beyond the school curriculum. He devoured books on geometry and philosophy, especially the works of Immanuel Kant, which encouraged him to question the foundations of knowledge itself. Unlike most students, Albert wasn't interested in memorizing formulas. He wanted to understand why the universe behaved the way it did. In 1894, the Einstein family's business collapsed due to economic competition, forcing Hermann to relocate to Italy in search of work. Albert, then 15, was left behind in Munich to finish school. Unhappy and increasingly alienated, he soon dropped out without informing authorities and joined his family in Milan. This decision effectively made him stateless and marked the first major break from formal education. Determined to continue his studies on his own terms, Einstein applied to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich, now ETH Zurich. Although he excelled in mathematics and physics, he failed parts of the entrance exam, particularly subjects like biology and languages. Instead of giving up, he enrolled at a Swiss secondary school in Aarau, where a radically different teaching philosophy emphasized free thought and discussion. This environment suited Einstein perfectly. It was in Aarau that Einstein experienced one of his earliest and most important thought experiments, imagining what it would be like to chase a beam of light. This simple mental exercise, carried out by a teenager lying in bed, would later become the conceptual seed of special relativity. By 1896, Einstein renounced his German citizenship to avoid military service and officially became a student at the Zurich Polytechnic. He was now surrounded by some of Europe's brightest young minds. Yet, even here, Albert remained an outsider, skipping lectures, relying on self-study, and challenging professors he felt were outdated in their thinking. As the century drew to a close, Albert Einstein stood at a crossroads. He possessed immense intellectual potential, but lacked academic discipline, political support, and institutional approval. Unknown to the world, however, the foundations of a scientific revolution were already forming inside his mind. As the year 1900 arrived, Albert Einstein graduated from the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich with a degree in teaching mathematics and physics. On paper, he was qualified for an academic career. In reality, he was almost completely shut out of it. Einstein had earned a reputation as a difficult student, outspoken, dismissive of authority, and uninterested in impressing professors. When he began applying for assistant positions at universities across Europe, his former instructors either ignored his requests or actively advised against hiring him. This rejection marked the beginning of one of the most uncertain periods of Einstein's life. For several years, he survived on temporary jobs, tutoring students, substituting as a teacher, and living in near poverty. During this time, his confidence wavered, but his curiosity never did. Even without institutional support, Einstein continued working privately on theoretical problems, driven by an internal need to understand the universe. A turning point came through Marcel Grossmann, a close friend from Zurich whose father had connections within the Swiss government. In 1902, Einstein was offered a position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern as a technical expert, third class. The job was far from glamorous. His task was to evaluate patent applications for electrical devices, ensuring they were original and logically sound. Yet, in an ironic twist of fate, this modest office job would give Einstein exactly what he needed: time, mental freedom, and stability. The patent office was quiet and structured. It demanded precision, but not creativity. Einstein finished his work efficiently, leaving long stretches of uninterrupted time to think. Surrounded by inventions that attempted to harness electricity, signals, and synchronization, his mind drifted toward deeper questions, especially about time itself. In Bern, Einstein also formed a small discussion group with friends, jokingly called the Olympia Academy. Together, they read and debated works by philosophers and physicists, including Hume, Mach, and Poincaré. These discussions sharpened Einstein's skepticism toward absolute truth and reinforced his belief that scientific concepts must be grounded in observation, not tradition. By 1905, at the age of 26, Einstein was still an obscure patent clerk, but internally, he was ready. That year would later be remembered as his Annus Mirabilis, or Miracle Year. In a single year, working largely alone and outside academia, Einstein published 4 groundbreaking papers in the journal Annalen der Physik. Each one addressed a fundamental problem in physics, and together, they reshaped the scientific world. The first paper explained the photoelectric effect, proposing that light behaves not only as a wave, but also as discrete packets of energy, later called photons. This idea directly challenged classical physics and would eventually earn Einstein the Nobel Prize, though recognition came much later. The second paper analyzed Brownian motion, providing empirical proof that atoms and molecules actually existed, a matter still debated at the time. This work helped solidify atomic theory as scientific fact. The third paper introduced the special theory of relativity, dismantling the centuries-old belief in absolute space and time. Einstein proposed that the laws of physics are the same for all observers in uniform motion, and that the speed of light is constant, regardless of the observer's movement. From this emerged radical conclusions: time dilation, length contraction, and the idea that time itself is relative. The fourth paper presented the equation E equals mc squared, revealing that mass and energy are interchangeable. Though the practical consequences were not immediately understood, this single equation would later transform global history. Despite the magnitude of these discoveries, Einstein remained largely unknown. He continued working at the patent office, his papers slowly circulating among physicists who initially met them with confusion, skepticism, and cautious admiration. Recognition came gradually. In 1909, Einstein was finally offered a professorship at the University of Zurich. For the first time, Academia opened its doors to the man who had rewritten its foundations from the margins. As Einstein stepped into the academic world, a new challenge awaited him, one even greater than special relativity. He had resolved a universe in motion, but gravity still remained unexplained. By 1909, Albert Einstein had finally stepped out of obscurity and into the academic world. His appointment as a professor at the University of Zurich marked a turning point, but it did not bring comfort or certainty. Though his 1,905 papers had begun circulating among physicists, many still struggled to understand their implications. Einstein was respected, but not yet fully accepted. He was entering a decade that would test his intellect, health, and persistence more than any other period of his life. Einstein soon moved between academic positions, teaching in Prague, Zurich, and later Berlin. These years were marked by constant transitions, both professional and personal. His marriage to Mileva Maric, once his intellectual companion, began to deteriorate under the strain of poverty, distance, and Einstein's growing obsession with work. While his public reputation slowly improved, his private life grew increasingly unstable. Scientifically, Einstein faced a profound problem. Special relativity had successfully redefined motion and time, but it deliberately excluded gravity. Newton's law of gravitation still worked remarkably well, yet it clashed with relativity's insistence that no influence could travel faster than light. Einstein became convinced that gravity was not a traditional force at all, but something far deeper, a property of space and time themselves. In 1907, Einstein experienced what he later called the happiest thought of my life. He imagined a person falling freely from a roof. In freefall, the person would feel weightless, just as if they were floating in space. This simple insight led to the equivalence principle, the idea that gravity and acceleration are fundamentally indistinguishable. This realization became the conceptual foundation of a new theory. However, turning this idea into mathematics proved extraordinarily difficult. Einstein soon realized that gravity must be described through curved space-time, a radical departure from centuries of scientific thought. To do this, he needed advanced mathematical tools that he did not yet possess. Once again, he turned to his old friend Marcel Grossmann, who introduced him to tensor calculus and differential geometry, complex mathematics originally developed with no physical application in mind. For nearly a decade, Einstein worked relentlessly, often in isolation. He filled notebooks with equations, discarded countless approaches, and repeatedly doubted his own progress. The mental strain took a serious toll on his health. He suffered from exhaustion, digestive illness, and periods of deep anxiety. At times, he was convinced that he was chasing an impossible dream. In 1914, Einstein accepted a prestigious position at the Prussian Academy of Sciences in Berlin. The offer came with freedom from teaching duties, allowing him to focus entirely on research. Yet the timing was grim. World War I erupted soon after, tearing Europe apart. While many German scientists supported the war effort, Einstein openly opposed it, embracing pacifism even as nationalist pressure intensified around him. This stance further isolated him socially and professionally. By November 1915, after years of struggle, Einstein finally completed the field equations of general relativity. The theory proposed that massive objects bend the fabric of space-time, and that what we experience as gravity is simply motion along this curvature. Time itself slowed near massive bodies. Space could stretch, warp, and ripple. The universe was no longer a static stage, it was dynamic and alive. Initially, the theory was understood by only a small group of experts. Its mathematics was intimidating, and its predictions were extreme. But one testable consequence stood out. During a solar eclipse, the gravity of the sun should bend the path of starlight passing near it. In 1919, British astronomer Arthur Eddington led an expedition to observe a total solar eclipse. The results confirmed Einstein's predictions. When the findings were announced, they electrified the scientific world. Overnight, Albert Einstein became internationally famous. Newspapers declared that Newton had been overturned. His face, once unknown, now symbolized human genius. Yet Einstein himself remained quiet, aware that fame was fleeting, while truth was eternal. The year 1919 transformed Albert Einstein from a respected physicist into a global phenomenon. Following the confirmation of general relativity during the solar eclipse, newspapers across Europe and America proclaimed a scientific revolution. Headlines announced that space and time had been rewritten. For the public, Einstein became the embodiment of pure intellect, a quiet man whose thoughts bent the universe itself. Einstein was unprepared for fame. He had spent most of his life working in isolation, largely indifferent to public opinion. Now, journalists followed him. Photographers documented his every move, and his name became synonymous with genius. Yet despite the attention, Einstein remained uncomfortable with celebrity. He often remarked that people praised him without understanding his work, and he worried that fame distorted the public's relationship with science. During the 1,920 seconds, Einstein traveled extensively, delivering lectures across Europe, Asia, and the United States. His lectures were often filled beyond capacity, even though only a fraction of the audience could follow the mathematics. People came not to understand relativity, but to witness the man who had changed humanity's view of reality. In 1921, Einstein was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, not for relativity, but for his explanation of the photoelectric effect, a safer choice for a conservative scientific committee. At the same time, the political climate in Germany grew increasingly unstable. The aftermath of World War I had left the country economically shattered and socially divided. Nationalism and anti-Semitism surged, and Einstein, as a Jewish intellectual and outspoken pacifist, became a target of hostility. Right-wing groups attacked his work as Jewish physics, attempting to discredit relativity on ideological grounds rather than scientific merit. Einstein responded not with silence, but with moral conviction. He used his fame to advocate for peace, international cooperation, and intellectual freedom. He supported the idea of a united Europe and criticized blind nationalism, believing it to be one of humanity's most destructive forces. His views often placed him at odds with political authorities, yet he refused to retreat into academic isolation. Philosophically, Einstein was deeply reflective during this period. He rejected the notion of a personal, interventionist God, instead embracing what he called a cosmic religious feeling, a sense of awe at the harmony and order of the universe. For Einstein, science and spirituality were not enemies, but complementary ways of understanding existence. He believed that uncovering nature's laws was one of humanity's highest pursuits. Scientifically, Einstein continued working tirelessly, though none of his later discoveries matched the revolutionary impact of relativity. He became increasingly dissatisfied with quantum mechanics, a field rapidly advancing through the work of younger physicists. While Einstein had helped lay its foundations, he rejected its probabilistic nature, famously remarking that God does not play dice. This intellectual conflict would define many of his later years. In his personal life, Einstein's first marriage ended in divorce, and he later married his cousin Elsa Einstein, who provided emotional stability during his years of fame. Yet even this relationship was shaped by Einstein's relentless devotion to work, which often left little room for intimacy. By the early 1930 seconds, dark clouds gathered over Europe. Adolf Hitler's rise to power and the growing influence of the Nazi Party posed an existential threat to Jewish citizens and freethinkers alike. Einstein, already under surveillance by nationalist groups, began to realize that Germany was no longer safe. As political tensions escalated, Einstein faced a painful decision, one that would sever his ties with his homeland forever. By 1933, the political situation in Germany had reached a breaking point. Adolf Hitler had become chancellor, and the Nazi regime moved swiftly to purge Jewish citizens, intellectuals, and political dissidents from public life. Albert Einstein, by then one of the most famous scientists in the world, was an obvious target. His home was searched, his bank accounts were confiscated, and his name appeared on lists of enemies of the state. While traveling abroad, Einstein made a quiet but decisive choice. He would never return to Germany. Einstein formally renounced his German citizenship and accepted a position at the newly founded Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. The move marked the beginning of his life in the United States, a land of safety, but also of deep moral conflict. Though grateful for refuge, Einstein felt the pain of exile profoundly. Germany had shaped his intellectual identity, and watching it descend into barbarism left him heartbroken. In Princeton, Einstein lived a simple, almost ascetic life. He dressed modestly, avoided luxury, and focused intensely on theoretical work. Unlike universities, the institute imposed no teaching obligations, giving Einstein the freedom to pursue long-term problems. His primary goal during these years was the creation of a unified field theory, an ambitious attempt to merge gravity and electromagnetism into a single mathematical framework. Despite decades of effort, this dream would remain unfulfilled. As Europe descended into war, Einstein's attention turned increasingly toward global events. He followed news of Nazi Germany with growing alarm, particularly reports that German physicists were investigating nuclear fission. Einstein understood better than most the implications of mass energy equivalence. If nuclear reactions could be controlled, they could release unimaginable power. In 1939, Einstein took part in one of the most consequential decisions of his life. At the urging of fellow physicists Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner, he signed a letter addressed to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The letter warned that Nazi Germany might be developing an atomic bomb and urged the United States to begin its own research. Though Einstein did not participate directly in the project, this letter helped initiate what would become the Manhattan Project. The development of the atomic bomb deeply troubled Einstein. A committed pacifist, he believed violence should be resisted whenever possible. Yet, he also understood the catastrophic consequences if such a weapon were developed first by the Nazi regime. This moral tension haunted him throughout the war years. When World War II ended in 1945, the full horror of nuclear warfare became reality. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki stunned the world. Though Einstein had no direct role in building the bomb, the public quickly associated his name with the weapon due to E equals mc squared. Einstein was devastated. He later stated that had he known Germany would fail to develop the bomb, he would never have signed the letter to Roosevelt. In the aftermath, Einstein became one of the world's strongest voices against nuclear weapons. He warned that humanity now possessed the means to destroy itself, and that scientific progress without moral responsibility was dangerously incomplete. He advocated for international control of atomic energy and supported the creation of global institutions to prevent future war. By the end of World War II, Albert Einstein was no longer just a scientist. He had become a symbol of ethical responsibility, grappling with the unintended consequences of human knowledge. After the end of World War II, Albert Einstein entered the final chapter of his life as one of the most recognizable figures on Earth. His face had become a universal symbol of intelligence, yet his inner world was far quieter and more contemplative. Now in his late 60s, Einstein was less concerned with fame or recognition and more focused on the meaning of knowledge, responsibility, and humanity's future. Einstein continued working at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, dedicating most of his time to his unfinished dream, a unified field theory that would bring all fundamental forces under a single mathematical framework. While physics around him evolved rapidly through quantum mechanics and nuclear research, Einstein remained unconvinced that probability lay at the heart of reality. He believed the universe was governed by deep, elegant laws still waiting to be discovered, even if he himself would never uncover them. Although his scientific influence within cutting-edge research declined, his moral and philosophical influence only grew stronger. Einstein became an outspoken advocate for world peace, civil rights, and freedom of thought. He openly criticized McCarthyism in the United States, defended intellectuals accused of subversion, and supported African American civil rights leaders during a time of widespread segregation. For Einstein, injustice anywhere represented a failure of human reason. In 1952, Einstein was offered the presidency of Israel, a largely symbolic role meant to honor his global stature and Jewish heritage. He declined respectfully, stating that he lacked the political experience and temperament for such a position. The refusal reflected his lifelong belief that power and authority were poor substitutes for wisdom and understanding. Einstein's personal life during these years remained simple. He walked daily through Princeton, often deep in thought, greeting neighbors casually. He continued playing the violin, finding comfort in music when equations failed him. Despite declining health, his curiosity never faded. He remained intellectually active, exchanging letters with scientists and philosophers across the world. On the 18th of April 1955, Albert Einstein died at the age of 76 after suffering an abdominal aortic aneurysm. He refused surgery, choosing a peaceful death over prolonged intervention. His final words were spoken in German, a language his nurse did not understand, leaving them lost to history. In a final act, consistent with his lifelong humility, Einstein requested no grand funeral, no public memorial, and no shrine. His body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in an undisclosed location. He wished to be remembered not as an icon, but through ideas. Yet remembrance was inevitable. Einstein's legacy reshaped civilization. His theories underpin modern physics, from GPS satellites to cosmology, from nuclear energy to black hole research. Beyond science, he left behind a vision of intellectual courage, a reminder that progress comes not from obedience, but from questioning the obvious. Albert Einstein proved that imagination could rival observation, that patience could outlast skepticism, and that one human mind, armed with curiosity, could change the way the universe is understood. His life was not just a story of genius, it was a testament to thinking freely in a world that often resists it.